Two states, including Colorado, have active Crown laws. Crown laws prohibit race-based hair discrimination, such as the denial of employment and education opportunities because of hair texture or protective hairstyles. Joining us today to talk about this is 9 News legal expert Whitney Traylor. This is actually passed in Colorado a couple of years ago, so now we're kind of well into it being implemented here in Colorado. I wanted to start off, though, with just why this was necessary. What was happening that we needed a law to make sure that rights were protected?
Right. Well, what happened was this, and this was actually an expansion of the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act to include hair as it relates to the definition of race. And what was happening was women, particularly black women, were having their hair in natural, braids. It was curly, of course, locks, all these different types of natural hairstyles. And we were finding in the workplace that they were being reprimanded, sent home, terminated for that. And these things are not, there wasn't a cause of action for that. And so what happened was across the nation, they started looking at the Crown Act. And so here in Colorado, they passed it to essentially protect women from, or men really, any hairstyle that's traditionally associated with a race or those types of things are now protected under our state law. And so you can't be fired for that type of appearance.
Gotcha. And when did you start to notice that state law was changing around this, that the conversation was really at the forefront?
Yeah, the conversation has been happening for some time, but it wasn't until, I think, really probably around 2020 that it started to get traction across the nation. I think the House passed the bill, but the Senate hasn't passed it yet. So it's gotten traction across the nation. And as you said in the lead-in, there are a number of states that have enacted this type of legislation. And it's been necessary because there were people actually, this is just how their hair grew. That was a natural part of it. And they were being terminated in the workplace.
Wow. Yeah. Can you give a couple of examples of where we were seeing that happen and how that was playing out?
Yeah, you were seeing it a lot with particularly, braids, that kind of thing, or locks, if you will. And there was a case in particular with an airline, and they said that it violated the grooming policy. And so that went up through the appellate process, and the courts upheld it, saying that, yes, this was a legitimate reason to terminate based on a grooming policy. But when they looked into it further, this is all based on sort of this Anglo notion of beauty and that type of thing. And so what the courts, and the issue around race discrimination and these types of things are what's called mutable characteristics and immutable characteristics. And so we don't want to be in the job being judged upon things that we have no basis, that we can't have any impact, our skin color, our gender, some of those types of things. And they were saying that hair is something that can actually be changed. But, if hair is a whole situation and everybody's is different. And so to say, well, you could straighten it, you could conform to these norms, was the courts, that's why the legislature came in and said, no, we can't, you shouldn't be able to do that.
We're almost out of time, but I do want to get to the idea of that while 22 states have laws like this, it means that more than half the country does not have that. Does a state law, does that influence what's happening in other states or does it impact it at all?
Well, it's not binding precedent. So if one state does it, it doesn't mean that another state has to follow it like the Supreme Court. But yes, you do start to see a sea change. And I think that's what happened was, it was originally, I think, California, New York, New Jersey. Then we had a few other states. Colorado was one of the first states. And so now we're starting to see that because, this is really the notion of this country, of our workplace, is that, hey, we want to judge people for the work that they're putting in, the actual, productivity, not these immutable characteristics like hair and skin color. So this is consistent with where we're going in our civil rights laws.
I remember when the law was passed here in Colorado, it was a big deal. Thanks so much for stopping by. We appreciate it.